Okay. Hey dude, how's it going? So what I was gonna do was just talk you through. I've only made one-ish real deck in this game. This is like this is like an actual deck as opposed to a couple of those like are they're decent, but they're not like an awesome thing. The thing I want to emphasize to you, the reason why I'm doing this is so that you can see how fun the game can get when you actually have a real deck instead of just the theme decks, although they're not bad. So I just want you to see like the kind of cool decisions you get to make. And so to do that, first you have to understand what I'm playing. And one thing I want to emphasize too is that um, I haven't paid a ton to play this game. I think I've paid in like maybe 15 or 30 bucks or something like that. But you do get rewarded for playing every day, which I know is not easy for you. But like, if you as you play over time, you slowly do start to accumulate a collection. And so like a deck like this isn't out of your reach, but also there are ones that might be a little bit closer, and I can help you with that too. Anyway, I just want to show you how nice decks work. So here we go. This is an Elysian tempo deck. Elysian is the time primal deck, yellow blue. So you have yellow cards and you have blue cards. Um, and those they function like sort of a lot like white and blue do in Magic, but maybe just a little bit different. So we'll talk about that. But the basic idea of the game is it's an aggro deck, which means that I'm trying to end the game as fast as I can, but I'm not like flat out like tons of cheap units, just balls to the wall aggro. I have some tricks, and that's what makes it fun. And so let's talk about real quick what the deck does. I would say that the first thing you have to know about real decks in this game is that they have this interesting thing called the market. And this is an interesting solution to the problem of sideboard cards in Magic. Magic has this really weird problem where sideboards are good and they let you put like narrow cards in your sideboard that are good in some matchups, but just absolutely blanks in others. And so, in Magic, you play a best of three, so you play one game unsideboarded and then you can sideboard. Um, but the problem is like a lot of times if like in Magic, if you in the first game you're just gonna lose if you don't have the right tech against it. So that really sucks. So this game has an interesting take, and they have the concept of the market, and there's a special card type called Merchant, and the one in white blue is this one, Great Valley Smuggler. When you enter when it says summon, that means when it enters the battlefield, you can choose a card from your hand to swap with a time or primal card in your market. And so basically, when I play her, I choose a card from my hand, and I can swap that card into the market, and I can get something else out. So these are all cards that are good, but not necessarily good in every single matchup ever. And so when I play her, I can choose the one of these that I think is going to help me most in the situation and get that out. A lot of times it's Infinite Hourglass, but we'll talk about why that is later. So anyway, so the general plan is to kind of get yourself set up on the first couple turns. To kind of go long or go as fast as you can. So we have Initiative of the Sands to ramp. She makes you have more power. So if you play her on turn one, you have 3 mana on turn two if you have land. Um, Amaranth Armadillo is like another kind of setup card. Like he's not that good by himself, but he gives all the units that you draw endurance, and he makes them more powerful, which is really cool. So you want to kind of get him out on turn two if you can. Resolute Monk is just a beater. It's a 3/1, but when you play a land card, a power card, he goes to 5/3 that turn. So he can be really powerful. It's like if you play him on turn two and then play a land card on turn three, power card on turn three, he's hitting for 5, which is pretty serious business. Um, the smuggler we already talked about. She kind of lets us get what we need out of the market. And a really common case for her is I play her on turn three and I get Infinite Hourglass out of the market, which is this card. And you'll note that she says, where is she? She says that she's +2/+2 when you have a relic. So she's a 2/2 by herself. If you have a relic, she's +4. She's a 4/4, and so this is a nice and easy, cheap relic to get. So that on turn four, she is a 4/4, which is really good. Plus, she has endurance, which is like vigilance for magic. And if you have an armadillo out, then she's actually a 5/5 because he also says your endurance units get +1/+1. So she can get really big really quickly, and she's good to get stuff out of the market. Kind of one of our big hitters is Psychalis, Burning Sand. He has charge, which is like haste and magic, and he can't take damage on the turn you play him. So that's really he's basically like a big fat five damage burn spell. That if they, I mean, they can put something in front of him to block him, but whatever that is going to die, and he's going to be fine. So he tends to die pretty quickly after his first turn, but 5 hits is pretty big, especially in a game that we're trying to close fast. And then the last creature is this really oddball card. It's called Daring Griffin, and it has a lot of complicated weirdness. But the basic thing it is if the enemy plays a spell while it's out, it dies. So that's kind of rough. But number one, countering a spell is often quite good, or it kind of locks them out of playing spells because they know that it's just going to get countered anyway. Oh, sorry, like when it dies, it negates the spell that they played. And then the other thing it has is this thing called Exalted, which is very different from the corresponding skill in Magic. But basically, when an Exalted creature dies, it turns into a weapon that one of your other creatures can put on. And the weapon has all the stats and abilities of the original creature, which means that, like, so let's say you have this Daring Griffin die and you put it on a Initiate of the Sands for simplicity. So she's just a 1/1. But if the Daring Griffin dies, it creates a 3/2 weapon with flying and reckless. And if you put that on her now, she's a 4/3 with flying and reckless. So it kind of does this like it's very efficient because it counters a spell and it makes one of your other creatures really powerful and turns into a flyer, which is really, really good stuff. So that's all that. And then by far, though, the most important card in the whole deck is this weapon called Sodi's Spell Shaper. And what it is um, it's a like on paper it's just a 1/1 weapon. So whatever creature you put it on, it gives that creature +1/+1. But it has two really important powerful things. One is that if someone holding this weapon hits the enemy player, which they often do in this deck, you get to draw a card, and that's huge in an aggro deck where you really kind of want to be fueling up and having lots of things to throw at them. But by far the best part of Sodi's Spell Shaper is that it has a thing called Spellcraft 2. Spellcraft means that when you play this thing, you can pay an additional amount of power and you get to do something else. In this case, you pay Spellcraft to play Equivocate. Equivocate is this thing right here under my mouse. It says put a unit into its owner's hand, then transform it into a random unit with the same cost. Now, on one hand, that doesn't sound incredible because you're not actually going up in card advantage, except for the fact that you might be drawing a card when you hit the enemy player. You're not going up in card advantage and you're just delaying a problem, right? But the thing is that in this game, creatures have such wacky and important effects to their deck that giving them a random creature of the same cost is way worse than them having the creature that they actually wanted to have. And also for reasons that are kind of easier to experience than explain. Transforming a creature is a really powerful way of removing it in this game. Like there are creatures that are very difficult to kill any other way, but transforming them into another creature is a much better way to deal with that. So basically, the bottom line is yes, you can play this for 2 power and it makes your creature bigger, and when it hits the enemy player it draws a card. That's all great, but you almost always want to play Sodius Spell Shaper with 4 mana up so that you can pay 2 for the weapon and then 2 to play Equivocate on a creature. And so that not only gets rid of the creature, it takes the creature off the board, it puts it back in their hand, it turns into something probably less annoying, and it clears the way so that we can do what we want to do, which is to beat down. So Sodi Spell Shaper is like the perfect card for this deck, and this deck couldn't work without it. It's really important. And just to emphasize that we really do love the Equivocate effect, in addition to playing 4 Sodi Spell Shapers that can equivocate, we also play 4 Equivocate itself because we really like the ability to get blockers out of the way and to get rid of problematic creatures. So that's all it is. Like basically the game plan is to get some amount of creatures out. Usually, at minimum, we want a Resolute Monk or a Psychalis or a Great Valley Smuggler or something. We want to pump them up with Daring Griffin and Sodi Spell Shaper, and we just kind of want to keep them off balance the rest of the game using things like Equivocate and Sodi Spell Shaper. And then one little thing to highlight, which is that we're also playing these really cool lands called emblems, and lands, their power. The way they work is if you play the power card and you have 3 of the appropriate influence already, you can decimate, which means you sacrifice 1 of your maximum total power. So, for example, say we have 4 power at the start of the turn, we play this new power, this emblem, and now we go up to 5 maximum power. But when we do that, we can actually sacrifice the one that we would have gotten and instead create a creature. So this one gives us a 3/1 Ice Elemental with Aegis, which is the thing that makes them, it's like a shield. It stops you from doing bad things to them. And then the yellow one, the time one, is a 2/2 Earth Elemental with Exalted. And remember, Exalted is that thing where when it dies, it gives a weapon to one of your other creatures. So this is really cool because these are lands when we need them to be lands, but they're also creatures when we need them to be creatures, which again is great when you're an aggro deck and you want to have a lot of stuff to throw at people. So that's the plan. It's a pretty simple deck, but it takes some fun to figure out how to pilot. And then when I do some play videos, I'll show you like the kinds of things I get to think about when playing this deck. And yeah, so stay tuned for that. Get excited and play this game with me. Okay, bye.